Well, good evening, folks. We're going to let folks trickle in tonight. We're lucky to have Congressman Mike Quigley with us, who's a leader on appropriations and the Intel Select Committee and several other things. But we're covering a bunch of topics tonight. So I'm glad that you're with us. Very important things. He's knowledgeable on a lot around foreign relations, and I have a bunch of questions there, as do you. You all have done a great job of sending me great questions for this week that we're going to try to get to all of them. If we don't, we'll answer them in another way as a follow-up. So I'm Marie Newman. I'm here on live stream with Mike Quigley, Congressman from Illinois 5, which is the city and the northwestern suburbs. And Mike is a wonderful leader, has been in Congress since 2009. Mike, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so just a couple of years. Pretty good at his job. And the reason I wanted to have Mike on tonight is that it's apropos. We're looking at a potential shutdown, and this happens frequently in this day and age when both sides can't come to the same place on the budget. And you know that we're extremely far apart on many things, everything from Medicaid to SNAP to Obamacare subsidies and on, and we'll get into that. So we'll talk to Mike about that. But Mike's also on the Appropriations Committee. He is a vice chairman of the Equality Caucus, and we're just so glad to have him tonight. So welcome, Congressman Quigley.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here and look forward to a nice discussion.
Great. Okay, folks. Well, I have your questions right here, so we're going to get right to it because Mike does need to leave at 7:30 sharp this evening. So, Mike, I guess I really want to start with, what do you think that Congressman Jeffries and Senator Schumer should or are asking for in exchange to avoid a shutdown? So let's go to the positive first. What are they asking for in order to avoid a shutdown?
Yeah, look, it all involves healthcare. I mean, there's a lot of issues that they could pick and choose from.
Yeah.
But I think the healthcare subsidies, the core issues, and a lot of the issues that we supported so long that came from the healthcare law, Obamacare. So, where we go from here, the fact is we'll probably vote on what they call a clean CR on Friday, a continuing resolution. Now, the reality of the situation is, as you know, if the Republicans stick together, they don't need us in the House.
Right.
The vote margins are narrow, but if they have everybody with them, then they don't need us. Our vote comes into play if they don't have quite enough votes. So, an example, a procedural motion to move that forward involved a Charlie Kirk resolution as well to make sure the members stayed on board.
Yeah.
Now, the Senate's a different story. The House, we stayed united last time, voting against the Republican bill to fund the government because, it was so extreme. Our friends in the Senate didn't stick with us in the entirety, and they were able to pass it. But this gets to an important point. Should we trust the Republicans in Congress or in the White House? And the answer is, this is a president that's gone after the appropriation process. This is an Article 1 power, and he's basically snatched it away. Republicans have let him do that, creating a terrible precedent. So, fool me once, shame on me, right? Fool me twice, shame on you. Fool me twice, it's my fault. So those Democratic friends of ours who voted with them and then they got their promises reneged on, I hope they've learned the lesson. So look, we want healthcare in there, but there has to be some secure promise built into the law that they can't renege. It takes 60 votes to pass the bill in the Senate, 50 votes to take it back.
Right.
You trust them unless you change the rules.
Yeah, I mean, because we learned another lesson about the kind of procedure of taking it back through rescissions, right? And so, so we don't want that to happen again. So, all of our hope, everybody, I mean, you've seen the polling just as we have, that over 2/3 of Democrats want you to shut it down if you don't get what you need from the negotiation, right? I mean, everybody's.
I just want folks to know it's not just the issues like healthcare.
Right.
It's the I don't trust them in a promise it has to be built into the law. I'm not even sure we can trust that. So
Right.
we'll see how it plays out. We're going to vote on it Friday.
Right.
Senate probably won't until next week. We'll
Right.
probably go into the following week if it somehow falls apart. So I don't expect that we'll see issues with the shutdown until that time. But either way, it's a failure. In the end, it's a failure to govern, which I think the Republicans have to bear that burden because they control the House, Senate, and White House. They can do this on their own if they have their own discipline.
Right. It is on them. First of all, we're asking just to do what's right and return to where we were. So it's not a big climb technically, but as Trump has said, no way will we agree to anything that the Democrats want. Now I have a little bit of an uncomfortable question for you. So do we trust that Senator Schumer won't roll over again? With all due respect.
No, I think Senator Schumer's the statements he's made in the last few days are pretty clear that they were going to stick to this and they were going to demand the provisions on health care. What he does in terms of the rules, I'm not sure. It's a body that's on the other side of the building, but in some respects, it's, as you know, seemingly in a different universe. Right?
Sometimes.
Strange, yeah, the strange machinations of the Senate.
Yeah.
So they disappointed us the first time.
Oh.
I'd like to think that there aren't enough Democrats that will go along with this if it's not right, that they'll have to come back to the drawing board. And that's what this is all about. It's interesting. When I got sworn in, and that was in a special,
Yeah.
the first Republican to come up to me was Mark Kirk. And Mark Kirk said to me, everything that gets done here that's any good gets done in the middle as a compromise. In a divided government, maybe that's, absolutely the case. But right now, we're not in that situation. They
Right.
have complete control over this, and we'll see if they'll act responsibly.
Let's hope so. And we'll all pray that Senator Schumer does the right thing and keeps his commitments and does what he says he's going to do right now. But let's take a quick hard turn, Mike, to Ukraine. Congressman Quigley, for everybody watching today, is also an expert on Ukraine and has a strong Ukrainian community right in his district, so is very familiar. And honestly, the spotlight's been off of it, right? Because we don't know if any negotiations are going on. And also, I'd like the state of play on the ground there, Mike. It's always horrible, right? How are the Ukrainians doing? I know that they've gotten some new technologies and there's a couple of good things going on. So if you would share the state of play.
Yeah, look, I think on the ground you're seeing what's basically a stalemate, in large part due to drone warfare and the extraordinary abilities and courage of the Ukrainian people and their armed forces. But what's concerning is Putin wins the game of attrition. The longer this goes, the better it is for his. A couple reasons. He's got a 6-to-1 manpower advantage. He can run 40% of his economy into this war because he just really doesn't care how it affects his citizens.
Right.
And he can treat his troops like cannon fodder. So my concern is that this can't go on forever for the Ukrainian army just because they're outnumbered. And I don't see another supplemental coming from the Congress because the president simply won't support it. And then you've got the dynamic of Putin-Trump. And the fact of the matter is, Putin understands strength, and that's it. And he doesn't see it in Trump. Trump has never questioned Putin. He's never really tested him. He's given him 7 ultimatums and let all those pass. So he's never held his ground. He's never even said who he wants to win this war. So I don't think there's any meaningful discussions taking place, and they won't. Here's what Putin would understand. If we pass the bipartisan sanctions bill that includes secondary sanctions, if we started talking about another supplemental, and we seize the Russian assets, billions of dollars here in the United States and 300 in Europe, and use that money to aid the war effort and to rebuild Ukraine. Then we get Putin's attention. Then you got a chance at peace that's no appeasement.
Right. Tell me this, given all that you've said, and they're at a stalemate, what is Europe doing to either be supportive via money, weaponry, or talks? Like, is anything going on that side of the ocean?
Look, I think they're trying to. They're just not as capable as they need to be. I mean, it took the U.S. and NATO's combined effort. One of the things this war did was peel off the veneer of some of those NATO countries in terms of what their capabilities really were militarily.
Yeah.
They're just underfunded for the threat they face, and obviously they need to bear a great deal of this responsibility. So there's aid coming. Now, some of those countries are giving way more than their share, particularly some of the smaller countries in Eastern Europe are really doing a lion's share, particularly for their size. But overall, NATO wants to help. They are helping. But what we really need is we need the U.S. to step up and to continue what they were doing under the Biden administration. I think if Putin saw that, he knows he can't run his economy at that level forever. Then
Yeah.
again, we have a chance for meaningful peace.
Well, let's hope for all of that that comes around. So a couple of airspace breaches in the last week or so. Poland, which seemed to be what was it, 20 some odd drones flying, and then in Romania as well. And I know they scrambled their jet fighters out, but tell us a little bit about what happened there and what do you think Putin was trying to achieve? Was it a calling card? Was it a warning?
Well, look, you can pick what you think is the most likely um, situation that took place. When you're making these long distance attacks using drone warfare into Western Ukraine, you're going to have, for various reasons, jamming and so forth, accidental, inadvertent uh, movements into Romania, Poland, and so forth, right? So I think you could look at that as sort of horrible, reckless conduct by Russians. Um, but if you don't believe in that scenario, then you see that it's purposeful and a test of the capabilities of air defense by NATO, a test of wills. Again, Putin basically thumbing his nose at NATO and the United States, saying, "You don't scare me. No one's pushing back. I'm just going to see how far I can go." I've been to Poland 6 times since this war started, and Ukraine 5, and the leaders of our military, of NATO's military, and Ukraine's all said the same thing to me, and that is, if we don't meet Putin's aggression here, there will be fighting in Poland.
Yeah.
We have Article 5, and then it's not just our dollars, and you'd probably have to double our defense budget, but it's bloodshed as well. So
Right.
the lessons of appeasement come back from 1939, and people aren't listening to them.
Yeah. I mean, just like on every front in our own country with this regime we have on our hands is that, and I say this every day, is that capitulation never works when it's a schoolyard bully or it's a huge superpower. Capitulation just doesn't work. It
And
never
I
can.
think isolation doesn't work either. And I think
No, no, at
appeasement
all. Yeah.
is a combination of that. You put it into a larger context, right? We're tariffing our friends. We're telling NATO that they're on their own. And maybe more important than all of that, we eliminate virtually USAID, our soft power. General Mattis, uh, defense secretary for Trump, of all things, pretty,
First administration. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Uh, he said something that was appropriate for today. He said, if you cut foreign aid, you better buy me more bullets. Soft power is a way to avoid armed conflict.
Yeah.
And as a result of all this, we have fewer friends. And my favorite presidential addresses are the shortest ones. FDR's shortest inaugural was his last one, and he speaks to today. And knowing what he dealt with the appeasers and getting the U.S. involved, it's valuable to remember. He said, we've learned that to have a friend, you need to be one in foreign policy, and
Right.
that happens over there impacts us over here. So
Right.
you're right. I mean, people aren't paying attention to Ukraine. I'm co-chair of the Ukraine caucus,
Yeah.
trying to sound the alarm as often as we can that this is a moral imperative and a strategic one as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it directly involves our ability to have friends around the world and be trusted and be a credible superpower, right? And that gets edged away every day.
I just said, as a member for 9 years now, of the Intelligence Committee, uh, friends share information that keep us safe, right?
Yeah.
And if you lose friends, maybe worse than that is if our friends don't trust us because we have incompetent, inexperienced sycophants in the intelligence leadership of our country,
Right.
and they see the signal screw up that you saw in bold letters.
Yeah.
You got to wonder why they would trust us with information that will keep us safer.
You probably can't answer very much on this, but I'm going to go ahead and ask the question, Mike, about the Intelligence Committee. Have you seen a slowdown in information?
I am concerned that the Intelligence Committee is not getting all the information it should get. That's about as far as I can
Yeah.
go.
Okay,
In
fair
its
enough. Well,
discuss-
well,
at the very least, we're hardly ever meeting, and so I would say
not a good sign.
you could quantify at a dangerous time. That's when you would expect more meetings to take place, not less.
One would think. Fair enough. We'll go ahead and move on to the next topic, which is political violence. We've, in the last 7-8 months, we've had Melissa Hortman, the state speaker in Minnesota, her husband, another lawmaker there, and several others. And then the day-to-day mass shootings we have in schools that are horrifying every time. Charlie Kirk about a week ago. And I'm just curious before we get to like policy and lawmaking, the tenor on the Hill right now, has there been any bipartisan conversations about anything?
I think there's a recognition that it's a very dangerous situation. And for the first time, members are being allowed to use a certain amount of their budget to hire personal security,
Yeah.
right? Because you can't always count on, and you don't want to tax local police all the time.
Right.
Not just for our safety and our family's safety. There's 9,000 threats in the last year against members of Congress.
Yeah.
The family certainly didn't buy into this. So it just gives you an indication that members are cognizant of that fact. What's troubling is, for the president to accuse the left of this stuff. I go back to the fact that I was in the room on January 6th when the president of the United States committed perhaps a president's greatest act of political violence, sicking tens of thousands of people on our democracy on a Capitol in which the number 2, 3, and 4 in succession were 60 feet away from being captured by this extremist mob that wanted to lynch the vice president. I was in the room where it happened, so I could take it pretty personally. So, any political violence is abhorrent, and no one deserves to be a victim of that. Um, some of it is recognizing that the manner in which members address and speak is important. Um, but what has taken place can't be allowed to be a muffle on free speech.
Right.
But as you know, the rights in the Constitution are balanced with safety and protecting the Constitution. This is an intense time, and people have gotten used to almost normalizing political violence. So, in short, answering your question, I think it's on every member's mind every day. But how we address it, there needs to be a
Yeah.
lot more discussion.
Well, thank you for that. Just to give everybody reference, at the level of threat, how it has increased. And we have to keep this in mind when we think about our members of Congress. So when I was in Congress, I left in January of 23. The threat level in that year was 6,000 threats. Now Mike tells us that it's at 9,000. That's a 30% increase, folks. So significant increases with each year happened, the threats on lawmakers, and we've seen that play out. So I just want to underline, Mike is so incredibly right that all political violence is aberrant. And we do have to be watchful and appreciate that they are putting their lives on the line. So just a personal note there for everyone. Um, I do want to touch on one topic before we let you go, Mike, and that's on SCOTUS. So right now in our city in Chicago, Trump has, well, he hasn't done this full invasion. He keeps threatening, but he's sent a lot of extra ICE folks. And recently the SCOTUS put a ruling together, kind of setting aside the Constitution and literally making it okay for profiling to occur. And anybody can kind of be stopped for any reason if they're an ICE agent. They have the ability to profile you and stereotype you and stop you. Has there been any discussion around that? Is there any Republican that finds that wrong and anti-constitutional?
I think there's a couple silos within the Republican Party. You may remember this. There are the true believers that are out there, and no matter what it is, they're with the president and his ideology. There's some that speak out, but as you know, most of them leave.
Yeah.
Right? You think about those who voted for impeachment, those who stood out and disagree with the president on any issue. Most of them either lost primaries or saw the handwriting on the wall and they left. And you saw the threats the administration made on them. To this day, they still see that. And then I don't know which column is worse. There are those between the other two. There are those who find his policies disgusting or have real problems with some of them, and they don't speak out. Putting aside the Supreme Court issue for a second, many of them work their whole political life to get in Congress, become a member of the Appropriations Committee, become a chairman of that. That's an achievement. That's a career.
Yeah.
And so when the president violates the Constitution and the laws and doesn't spend money that's been and it doesn't get the appropriate approval not to, and they don't even speak out, the chairman of the Appropriation Committee is a nice guy, said, our bills are voluntary or something like that. It's just, you're just giving up. Why show up if what we're doing is just voluntary and they're not laws? I think one of the things that's horribly, tragically ironic about what Supreme Court did is, as you said, they decided that ICE can racially profile people based on the color of their skin, the languages they speak, or how they spend their time. At the same time, they said that colleges can't consider diversity in their admissions practice. And all of this, as you know, is in their shadow docket. So for those who don't show up and vote in races for election for Senate, there's 3 of these justices put in place by Trump. And we better hope everybody stays healthy for the end of this administration so that, we can win back the House and the Senate. Most policy problems have political solutions. There's no doubt all of these have. We could be talking about any issue and it would be the same answer. And finally, just to show you the agents of chaos, you're asking all the important questions for today. But because they've always got 20 or 30 things in the air, and if they don't like what's happening, they add more. We almost never talk about climate change. And that's probably, almost certainly, what our grandchildren are going to be most angry with us about.
Right. Mike could say to me all the time, Mom, why aren't you talking about it more? And it's like, you're right. I used to talk about it a lot.
There's no vehicle for it. We have to talk about it. I lead a climate tour to a different national park every year that we talk about what's happening to our great natural national treasures.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, we're just playing defense on this.
It's
I guess a final point when you mentioned the Supreme Court is I do get asked a lot, why don't we sue? Why don't we have lawsuits? And as you know, we don't have the ability. Only the Speaker of the House can lead those lawsuits. We can sign on to amicus briefs. We can work with ACLU and other groups on their efforts. But unfortunately, and I think a lot of those lower courts, the appellate courts, have done great work pushing back on Trump's attack on the rule of law. Uh, I'm proud of them for that, but we're at the mercy of a 6-3 disadvantage at the Supreme Court.
which is incredibly frustrating for everybody. Two quick final questions, and then we need to get you back to your calls, Congressman. So redistricting, not optimal for any state, right? But we might have to be a team player. How do you feel about redistricting in Illinois?
You fight fire with fire.
Yeah.
Ultimately, everybody knows what's the ideal. And there's a bill in there I'm a co-sponsor of in Congress that would require all states to do nonpartisan commissions to draw maps that our founding fathers envisioned. One person, one vote. No groups are excluded and diluted and so forth. All things that we understand to be the right thing. So there's a bill to do that. But if what's going to happen in Texas has already happened. We'll see how the court do that in October. There's a referendum in California in November. But if they go to Indiana, then you got to go to Illinois. If they go, so it's a race to the bottom. But again, do you want them to continue to control the House when they're going to devastate the rule of law?
Right.
I'd like when we get back into the majority in both houses in the White House that we actually pass a bill that makes things square. So it's one person, one vote.
Please.
Whatever they vote
Please
on,
do.
then we address it that way.
Yeah. Final question that I ask all my guests. What are we ignoring at our own risk? What is that thing that you feel like isn't talked about enough that's quite serious that we're ignoring?
I want to say just generally, we don't have enough time to go into all the details. There are a number of critical issues that are playing out in Africa, the continent that will have as much impact or more than any other in the world. So what's taking place there from a wide variety of areas, including Russian, Chinese influence there, to the fact that there's no USAID programs there. So the front lines of our public health defense aren't on our borders. They're in countries in Africa, for example. The unrest there, the starvation that's taking place there, the political instability, just a slew of other things. It's a continent that deserves more attention. And again, what's the right thing to do is also the smart thing to do. There's so much more we can do for that continent and its people that we aren't doing, and it's not going to get much play in the near future. And it certainly won't be a priority of this administration.
Well, thank you for that. And we will start to think about that and really appreciate your time tonight. Congressman Mike Quigley, Illinois 5, thank you for your time tonight. Everybody have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.